It was a cold, foggy evening when young Jim Hawkins first laid eyes on the peculiar old man named Billy Bones. Jim was just a boy, living with his mother in a small inn called the Admiral Benbow, located in a quiet village by the sea. Life had been simple and uneventful, until Billy Bones came to stay. Billy Bones was a gruff, weathered man who arrived one winter night, dragging a large sea chest behind him. He seemed strangely anxious, as though constantly on guard. And Jim couldn't help but notice the way the man stared out the window, as if expecting someone to arrive at any moment. Billy's behavior quickly became more odd as the days passed. He spent hours sitting in the corner of the inn, sipping rum and muttering to himself, always looking over his shoulder, always nervously scanning the horizon. Despite his strange behavior, Billy Bones became a regular guest at the Admiral Benbow. He was loud and often rude, but Jim's mother tolerated him out of kindness, offering him a bed and food in exchange for whatever payment he could afford. He seemed to have money at times, but then would run out and ask for more drinks, often borrowing from Jim's mother, promising to pay later. One night, things took a darker turn. A group of sinister-looking men arrived at the inn, knocking on the door with urgency. They were looking for Billy Bones, and they weren't about to be denied. Jim was able to overhear fragments of their conversation, which was filled with warnings and threats. Billy Bones had once been part of a notorious pirate crew, and the men were part of that crew, now demanding money or an answer for old debts. The situation escalated when Billy refused to pay, and the men became violent. Billy was struck with a stroke during the confrontation and collapsed on the floor, his face pale and twisted with fear. In his final moments, Billy managed to give Jim something of great importance, a treasure map. He handed Jim the map and begged him to keep it safe. Then, in a final rasping breath, Billy Bones was gone, and with him, the key to a life-changing adventure. Jim's mother, unaware of the true significance of the map, assumed it was nothing more than a trinket, but Jim could feel the weight of it in his hands. The map held promises of treasure, of mystery, of danger. His curiosity began to take over, and he knew he couldn't just forget about it. The decision to seek the treasure. After Billy Bones' death, Jim and his mother found themselves in a difficult situation. The inn was small, and the debts Billy had left behind were numerous. In an effort to pay off some of the debts and get their finances in order, Jim's mother decided to sell Billy's chest, which Jim had been guarding so carefully. Little did she know, it was not filled with clothes and old trinkets, but with gold coins and a treasure map. A treasure map that would change Jim's life forever. One afternoon, as Jim and his mother sorted through the chest, they discovered a small wooden box hidden inside. It was intricately carved and locked, but Jim managed to open it. Inside, he found gold coins, enough to make their financial troubles seem distant and unimportant. However, it was not the money that Jim focused on. It was the treasure map. The map, despite its age and wear, was clear enough to show a small island marked with an X and a cryptic notation that promised riches beyond imagination. The discovery of the treasure map sent Jim's thoughts racing. Should he keep the map for himself and secretly seek the treasure? Should he tell someone? What would happen if the pirates found out that the map was still in existence? The prospect of hidden treasure filled Jim's thoughts, but he knew that he couldn't take the risk of going alone. That night, Jim took the map to Dr. Livesey, a trusted family friend and local physician. Dr. Livesey was a practical man, and Jim could tell that he was skeptical at first. However, once Dr. Livesey examined the map, his eyes widened in recognition. The map, he realized, pointed to a place that was legendary among sailors and adventurers, Treasure Island. This was a place said to be rich with treasure, hidden by the infamous pirate Captain Flint. It was a secret guarded by death, betrayal, and danger, but it was also a secret that promised untold riches. Dr. Livesey was intrigued, and after a long discussion, the two of them decided to share the secret with Squire Trelawney, a wealthy landowner who was a close friend of Dr. Livesey. Squire Trelawney was a man of bold action and grand ideas, and upon hearing the news, he immediately set about organizing an expedition to seek out the treasure. With Dr. Livesey and Jim by his side, the squire would make the necessary arrangements to procure a ship, hire a crew, and sail across the seas in search of the treasure. With all the details in place, the three of them prepared for an adventure of a lifetime, though none of them could have known the dangers that lay ahead. The voyage begins, the Hispaniola. The preparations for the voyage were swift, and before long, the ship, the Hispaniola, was ready to set sail. Captain Smollett, an experienced but stern sailor, was hired to command the ship, while Dr. Livesey and Squire Trelawney organized the other details. Jim, of course, was eager to embark on the journey, but he was also keenly aware of the danger they were heading into. He had no idea what awaited them on Treasure Island, but the map had called to him, and now he couldn't turn back. As the Hispaniola set sail from England, the crew was a mix of seasoned sailors and less experienced men. There was no doubt that there were men among them who were up to no good. In particular, Jim found himself wary of the ship's cook, a man named Long John Silver. Silver was charismatic and charming, with a one-legged gait and a sharp mind, but Jim couldn't shake the feeling that something about him wasn't quite right. Silver was friendly, but Jim sensed that he had ulterior motives. Long John Silver seemed to take a particular interest in Jim, and the two of them often had conversations when Jim would visit the galley. Silver was always kind to him, offering him food and advice, but Jim remained suspicious. Over time, Jim noticed that Silver would speak in hushed tones with a few of the other crew members, and sometimes, Jim overheard him muttering to himself. The more Jim listened, the more it became clear. Long John Silver was not the kind-hearted cook he appeared to be. The growing suspicion, uncovering the mutiny. As the Hispaniola sailed farther from England and closer to the island, Jim's suspicions grew stronger. It wasn't long before he overheard Silver and some of the crew members speaking in private, discussing their plan to take the treasure for themselves. Jim was horrified to realize that Silver wasn't just a cook. He was the leader of a pirate crew, and the men aboard the ship were plotting a mutiny. The mutiny would occur as soon as they arrived at the island. The pirates, under Silver's command, would overthrow the loyal crew and seize the treasure for themselves. Jim was torn. He couldn't reveal his discovery to Dr. Livesey and Squire Trelawney, as he feared Silver would retaliate. But at the same time, he couldn't just sit back and let the pirates take control of the ship. One night, Jim took matters into his own hands. He slipped into the pirates' quarters and overheard them, making final preparations for the mutiny. He discovered that Silver was much more dangerous and calculating than he had realized. Silver had carefully manipulated the crew into following his lead, and Jim realized that the situation was even more perilous than he had thought. Jim made the decision to warn the loyal crew members, and soon, he was involved in a battle for the ship, the treasure, and his own survival. The mutiny, a battle for survival. The mutiny came sooner than expected. As the Hispaniola neared Treasure Island, the pirates seized their chance. They launched a surprise attack on the loyal crew, overpowering the men who had been guarding the ship. Jim, Dr. Livesey, and Squire Trelawney found themselves on the defensive, desperately trying to protect the ship and prevent the pirates from gaining control. The battle was fierce, and Jim was forced to take action, using his wits and quick thinking to stay one step ahead of the pirates. At one point, Jim had to make a daring escape, sneaking away from the pirates and running into the jungle on the island. He knew he had to find allies if he was to survive. It was in the jungle that Jim made an unexpected ally, Ben Gunn, a madman who had been stranded on the island for years. Ben had once been part of Flint's crew, but he had been abandoned by the pirates when they had taken the treasure for themselves. Now he was living alone on the island, talking to himself and living off the land. Ben Gunn was strange and unpredictable, but Jim saw in him a potential ally. Ben knew the island well, and he was eager to help Jim and the loyal crew recover the treasure. Together, they planned their next move, the final showdown, the treasure. The climax of the story came when Jim and his allies confronted Long John Silver and the pirates. The battle for the treasure was intense, with Silver's cunning pitted against Jim's resourcefulness. In the end, Jim and the loyal crew emerged victorious. The treasure was secured, and the pirates were either captured or forced to flee. Jim had proven himself brave and resourceful, earning the respect of those around him. He had survived the dangers of Treasure Island, and with the treasure now in hand, he could finally return home. However, Jim knew that the island's mystery would never leave him. It had shaped him, challenged him, and changed him forever. Conclusion: the return to England. After the victory, Jim and the crew returned to England, the treasure safely in tow. Jim's life would never be the same again. The adventure had been dangerous, but it had also been exhilarating. He had faced fear, treachery, and uncertainty, and had emerged stronger for it. The treasure had been found, but it was the lessons Jim learned along the way that were the true prize. The story of Treasure Island ends with Jim Hawkins reflecting on the lessons of the journey, the value of courage, the dangers of greed, and the complexities of human nature. Jim would never forget the lessons he learned on the island, and he knew that his adventure would remain with him forever. Stay tuned for more enlightening content. Head over to www.mybookssummary.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share the magic with friends, and let's grow together through the power of books and interesting stories.